Welcome to Surrendering to the Signs. I'm your host, Laura Gates. Our conversation today is with Bob Gates, my father. Bob was a college professor at Syracuse University for 4 decades, and he's also the man who taught me how to kayak and sail and ski and fish. And he is absolutely a self-taught person. Everything he's learned how to do in his life, he's learned from a book, and he's taught me that as well. And he's the first in his family to go to college, and both he and my mom went on to get PhDs and teach at Syracuse. So they've instilled the learning mindset in me and instilled a lot of values in me. This conversation is mostly Bob talking about his path in life, which of course is intertwined with my path in life. And any daughters out there know the power of the father-daughter relationship for good and bad. And we talk about both of those in this conversation. And I really wanted to give him space to tell his story more than our story. So you'll hear more of him than me in this conversation. But I think it's insightful in terms of one man's journey in finding himself. And I welcome you all to listen. We're going to have a conversation about nothing and see where it goes.
Nothing is my favorite topic.
There you go.
As you may know, I taught a course called Signifying Nothing.
That's right.
Yeah.
So, you are how old now?
83.
83. Just turned 83.
Yeah.
So, what in your 83 years of life would be helpful for us to know about?
That's a great question. Do you mean helpful in terms of advice that I might give somebody or experiences I've had? Or so what's your sense here?
In particular, what I'm interested in, what I talk about, what I think people who are listening might be interested in is about living in these times, which are confusing to some, chaotic to some, overwhelming to some, and finding meaning and purpose in that. And I think you're someone who has been on a journey of self-discovery and purpose finding for a long time. And I'm just curious, either if you want to share with us the path you've been on, the journey you've been on, maybe that, like, what do you see as your path to awareness or consciousness or whatever you want to call it, and what you've taken away from that?
That's a pretty tall order. And I could give you the hundreds of pages that I've written about that, but let's see if we can make it short. I suppose what I want to start with is I believe that for the first 35 or so years of my life, I was totally unconscious. I was controlled by my environment, by my upbringing, by the society, by the culture, by what I'd learned, by what I'd been taught. And I had no independent sense of a genuine, authentic self to oppose to that. And I think a lot of people are in that situation, unfortunately. I had a number of experiences, some very painful, some very troubling, that you know about, when your mom and I got separated and then divorced and broke up the family, that were very devastating for me and for other members of the family. And for the first time, I had to, or I was forced to, or I was led to look inside and see what was going on, instead of being totally conditioned by the world I was brought up in. And I learned some very painful things. I learned some very difficult things. But it was a radical shift in my experience. I had a therapist who invited me to go inside of myself. At the age of 37 or 8 at that point, I had no idea what that meant. But I trusted him. And I went inside and I had people inside of me. I had figures in there. I had voices. I had something other than this world that we've become so familiar with. And that was a defining, shifting moment of my life. It didn't solve my problems because I still thought my problems could be solved in the outer world. By relationships, by my job, by success, by what I did, by my experiences. Go sailing, go kayaking, go camping, have a relationship with this person and that person. And I had to gradually be taught that that was not. So I'll stop there as a start.
Okay. So what was the way? If that wasn't the way, well, how did you discover a different way?
And so once again, I was fortunate in that these discoveries were forced on me. So I was in a relationship that was very troubled. I went and lived by myself for 2 years. I had never been without a dependent relationship with a woman, either my mother or girlfriend or wife or whatever. And so I went into a period of isolation and depression and suffering. But somehow I knew that I was choosing and that I was challenging what my life had been. And I had some very painful experiences. And one morning I woke up in total bliss, in total, absolute, joyous, melting bliss. And it didn't last, but it was a taste. It was like, what is this? I've come to have a sense of what it is, not that I always can experience it, but the basic and underlying principle here is joy does not come from the outside. Happiness does not come from the outside. We can simulate joy and happiness. We can get satisfaction from the outside, but it always goes away. It always changes, it always disappears. And there is a kind of joy, there is a kind of happiness, satisfaction, peacefulness, equanimity that is available. That's our basic nature. That is who we really are. And we can get tastes of that. And perhaps live in that more fully. Only if we withdraw our desires and aversions and attention from those things in the outer world which we had been told would provide happiness and satisfaction in our lives.
So the ego trappings of the world?
The term I like is conditioning. Ego like creates an entity.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And the more we solidify that, even in opposition to it, okay, we could say, oh, the ego is bad. We've got to rid of the ego. We've got to fight the ego. We're still reifying it. We're still believing it. Okay. Whereas really it's a fiction. It's an illusion. There's no such thing. You look for yourself and say, who am I? And say, oh, my ego. It's like just another word. Conditioning, on the other hand, we could talk about as what has happened to us. What has the conditions under which we have lived our lives, which have brought us to certain beliefs of what we should be doing, who we are, our identities, what makes us happy. As I said before, all of these things are imposed on that initial, beautiful, free, loving, generous, happy self that we were when we were born. I mean, you look at any baby, they've got it all, and they beam it out at us. That's why we love babies, because they've got this beautiful energy that comes out of us. I'm really noticing this in the last last couple of years. I go somewhere and there's a family with kids, and the father and mother walking along, and the kids are jumping up and down. Or there was a little girl the other day. We were at the farmer's market. We were coming back. You and I were coming back from the farmer's market. Did you notice the little girl with the pink the bright pink sandals on in front of us, little sparkly sandals. And she was stamping her feet and looking at her. She was like, oh boy, look at that. Look what I've got. And you could say, well, she was happy because of her slippers, but I think she was bringing that happiness. I don't think the slippers might have allowed that to come out, right? So we may be encouraged by our environment, but we got to bring it. We've got to bring it to that and have that as an inner experience of our true and genuine nature.
When you woke up feeling that bliss, you had been practicing meditate. You had been in a practice. No, this didn't just come out of
That's
the clear
true.
blue sky.
That's true. The therapist was named John. He invited me into his office. After a couple of sessions, he said, "You're so much in your head. I'm frustrated. Let me try something different." He said, "Sit in that chair and enter your body at any point." This made no sense to me. This is crazy. What does that even mean? But somehow I trusted him enough, and immediately I was inside. I was in this domed space. And he said, "What's going on?" I felt horrible. I started crying. I felt like I was such in pain, suffering. I felt trapped. He said, "Okay, go sit in that other chair." No, he said, look around. You see anything? I said, "Yeah, there's a man over there. He's standing over there in the distance." Describe him. I said, he's kind of haughty and superior and kind of distant. He said, "Get into the other chair and become that man." Sure, okay. I need to move chair immediately. It was the other man. He said, "Tell me what you see." I said, "I see this man in a cage, and he's crying and weeping, and he's just screaming in pain." He said, "Well, what about him?" I said, "Nothing to do with me. I don't know what he did, but I'm fine." As my daughter, you probably know this man. Well, you've probably seen this man, right? This is a part of me. You probably hadn't seen that other man, except when we had a session with John, you said to me, part of the scary part of my dad and my mom breaking up is I saw my dad cry for the first time. I was like, holy shit. You're like 15, 16 years old and what is wrong with me? So there we are. We have parts, we have components that are, where are they? They're in our unconscious. They're not available. They affect us. They rule our lives in some ways. But what am I going to do? We have to get to know them. We have to get to incorporate them. We have to learn from them. So that's one piece. And I say that only because that was before I then had therapy with John's wife, Phyllis, who said, "I think meditation would be helpful for you." Then she gave me a book and I read it. I went home. I sat down in the chair to meditate. I immediately got up. I couldn't do it. Eventually I did. I went back to her the next session and I said, "Oh, I love this book and blah, 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 and this." And he says this, and he says that, and this story about the monks, and this story about Zen. And she said, "What the is wrong with you? Did you do it?" I said, "Do what?" "Meditate." She said, "You're not supposed to read the book. You're not supposed to just learn something. You're supposed to meditate." So I began to meditate. And so I meditated for now 45 years, let's say.
Yeah, and just for context, this was the late 70s,
1980.
before everybody out there was meditating, before anyone was doing somatic therapy, entering your body in different points.
Yeah. Well, there had been a real tradition of Alan Watts and And there were a couple of Zen monks in San Francisco who taught Zumi Roshi and so forth. So there was some of that, but not in my environment, not in my local. Phyllis, this therapist, had gone to the Insight Meditation Society in Barre, Massachusetts, for a retreat. So she'd gotten a touch of this, and that was the beginning. I sometimes tell people, a little exaggerated perhaps, that meditation saved my life.
Mm.
That it really was a stay for me. It was a grounding. It was a getting into a sense of peacefulness. It was only later, much later, that the meditation turned into something more profound, more interesting, other than a kind of calming presence and centeredness.
So you said you were forced to change. Do you feel that this type of consciousness can happen without the 2x4 whacking you over the head? I mean, I have had many enlightening experiences in my life, but most of them have come from that dark night of the soul.
Yeah, for most people it does. Why would you go into the difficult, dark places of yourself and in fact face the suffering if you're not suffering? So most people, it takes a long time for some people to get to a point of suffering where they think, gee, maybe I shouldn't try to make another $1 million. Maybe I shouldn't look for another car. Maybe I shouldn't leave my wife and find another woman. Maybe that's not going to help. But in order to do that, you've got to be feeling the pain. You've got to be feeling the suffering. You've got to be blah, blah, blah. Jung has a famous saying, no birth of consciousness without pain. And what he means is you've got to accept the pain and go into the pain. But often the impetus for it is coming to the end of your rope and feeling suffering and finding no way out. And finally it's like, oh, okay. But you asked me about being forced. The other miracles of my life have been revelations that came from who knows where, but were not chosen by me. The best example I can give you is that at that time when I was living alone for a couple of years, this would have been 82 to 84, I was in the university bookstore one day and I saw a book called Drawing on the Right Side of the Brain. And I, on impulse, picked it up. I had never done any art. I'd never been interested in art. I had never created anything really. I never created a poem. I never created a story. I never created a painting before that point. Drawing on the right side of the brain. Very meticulous, specific, realistic drawing, pencil drawing. How to draw an object so it looks like, how to make a drawing that looks like what you're drawing. And I spent months at that. And I learned to draw. And I got pretty good. I mean, people look at it and say, wow, that's really good. And then it went away. The impulse went away. And then sometime later, maybe as much as a year later, I'm not sure, I was in the bookstore again, and there was this display at the checkout of Prismacolor drawing pencils. Impulse once again. Something made me pick up that package of pencils. I went home, I got out my drawing pad, and suddenly images started coming out. These are not realistic images. These were like something out of a myth or a dream or a book of spirits or whatever. Wild and crazy images. And once a day for a month, I did a color drawing. I didn't do those drawings. They came to me, right? So at that moment, I became an artist. Rather, I learned how to channel an artistic impulse that, once again, everybody has access to. It might come in a different form. Somebody will be drawing, somebody will do something else. But that also was given to me or forced on me or made available to me because I'd been opened up in some, because I'd been cracked open a little bit and was now open to that impulse of creativity and imagination. Things were very difficult in our family. I had done some things to hurt you, to hurt your mother, to hurt your sisters. I was out of control. I was being controlled by forces that were the bad forces, the ones we've been talking about, and the good ones. And it's a period about which I feel a lot of guilt and a lot of sadness. And yet here I am talking about these wonderful things that were happening even while I was suffering. But you were suffering. And so I'm wondering, as we talk about this, if you want to talk about that and in terms of who I was to you or what was going on while I was going through this. We don't have to. This is where I don't want this just to be me telling a story.
Mm-hmm. Well, first of all, your language is interesting to me when you say I was doing these things to you. I don't feel like things were done to me as much as I was impacted by things you were doing.
Yeah.
Which to me is different. You maybe got angry and lost your temper once in a while. It was more the unconsciousness that caused the pain and the suffering. And unfortunately, until I went through my own divorce in my early 30s, I don't think I felt much of anything. I think I shut it all down, locked it in a box, went and had a cocktail. So there was suffering, but I saw it more in the people around me. And I just locked it away. And so it wasn't until I went through my own heartbreak, feeling betrayed, feeling abandoned, and that all just came tumbling out 10 times more maybe than the situation, just because I hadn't processed what had happened in my teen years. Yeah. So I think I did what a lot of teens do, which is just get busy with other stuff and numb and self-medicate. Yeah. I mean, it wasn't easy going back and forth, and it was more of an inconvenience to my teenage years that I had to move back and forth between houses. And I think, again, what I shut down was the positives of our childhood. Like I was more focused on this guy's being a jerk, as opposed to later on looking back and seeing that there was a lot of good in my foundation. Yeah. Camping trips and all the activities we did, skiing and kayaking. And it's ironic that today I work with leaders to be more conscious leaders. And it's not lost on me that part of what propels me to do that is what I experienced working with people in positions of power so that they use their power for good and not for bad. Yeah. But what's ironic is even people recognizing they have power. Like, I don't think you knew the responsibility. I think you were burdened by the responsibility, but I don't know that you realized how much your leadership of our family, how important it was until it wasn't there. And then when it wasn't there, it was a huge vacuum. And that's what I find fascinating in the world today is there's like a vacuum of leadership in so many ways. Yeah. And it all comes from exactly what you're talking about. We are all these individuals who go up the ladder and we have more and more power. And then if we don't recognize that we have that power, then we're not using it appropriately. Yeah. And I don't think you even realized how much power you had over all these humans. Yeah. Maybe even now you don't realize how much power you have over all these humans as the patriarch of a family. And I think that's part of what's wrong in the world today is that I think if people more owned and recognized the power they hold over the humans that they hold it over, that
we would be in a better place. So I'm kind of taking it from my personal experience to the global experience, but that's who I am. So much of my life is translated into my work, and then I bring it back into my life. And I just can't tell you how many times I work with leaders and I sit in a room and I see them with their team and I'll say, do you see the power you hold? And they'll say, I'm just the assistant to the person in power, or I'm just the... And it's like, well, everyone's looking at you. Everyone's listening to you. Everyone's doing what you say. Everyone's worried what you think about them. That's a tremendous amount of power.
Yeah.
Or by virtue of your title on a piece of paper that you have the power to hire and fire, that's a tremendous amount of power. And so I think that's more, my experience was shutting down, withdrawing, and avoiding until I couldn't avoid it anymore. Yeah. Which is kind of the same thing you're saying. Like you get to some point where something happens to you where you have to look in the mirror. You have to fall to your knees and surrender and say, I give up. And then it's at that point where you just think you can't go on any further, that the voice comes in, the signs show up, the book falls off the shelf on your head, and you're shown this path. I believe you're shown a path. When I listen to your story, I hear those signposts along the way that were dropped in your lap. You could have said, screw you, and walked out of Phyllis's office and not meditated. You could have walked past the book on drawing. You could have walked past, and we do that all day long. We don't even pay attention to the nudges, but we pay attention to the nudges, and then that takes us to the next one, and then the next one, and here we are.
Yeah. Once you get that sense that there is some wider vision, purpose, impulse, instinct, spirit, revelation there somewhere, it's hard to walk away. Once you begin to trust that a little bit, and then more and more as it has a positive effect. Yeah. So that's why I'm so focused on those early moments in that. There have been plenty more later, but they're less important because they were part of a gradual process of insight and revelation and so forth. But would not have been possible except for these two or three formative things. But yeah, I could have walked away, I suppose. I'm glad I didn't.
At this stage of your life, where your basic Maslow's hierarchy of needs is pretty much met, with a lot less time in front of you than behind you, what informed your path now?
I'll just make a side comment about Maslow's hierarchy, because at the end of his life, he added something to the top, which is the spiritual. He hadn't had that before. So you could look into that. It's interesting. I'm still on the path. I will always be on the path. There's no end point. There's no revelation at the end of it. There's no awakening. There's no enlightenment. There is the continued path. And I'm continuing to learn that the more I pay attention to my own troubled emotions, judgments of other people, unkind behaviors, unconscious acting out, triggered responses, those are all now grist for the mill. They're now all the opportunities. They are all, each one of them, every one of them is a hint or a clue to a further deconditioning, to a further letting go, to a further cleansing of the soul that allows me to live a more comfortable and equanimous life, that gives me a greater and greater sense that things can only be as they are, that things are just going to be what they are. So when challenges come up, including the most difficult one that you and I have both faced together, of Janice's death, we look to the comfort of this wider vision that her spirit and our spirit are the same, that we can feel great sadness over that loss, great love for her, and yet continue to know that we have to live in this world in the best way we can, and that we can't solve anyone else's problems. We can't really help other people unless they want to help themselves. We can only live our best life that we can by whatever guide and spirits and learnings come to us when we feel these moments of grace.
What is your practice these days?
My practice is to sit quietly and wait for whatever relieves the remaining sense of a conditioned self to fall away. And in those moments, I have insights, and they always feel like something lost rather than something learned or gained. And so there things get purified, things get cleansed, things get dropped away, and life becomes more living itself rather than me living it. And so surrender, the word you used, giving up, surrender, allowing things to be what they need to be and not getting in the way.
I love Michael Singer's work, and he talks a lot about this and this art of surrender. Some people might think that's letting go or giving up or some powerlessness. How would you describe this gain? It's interesting you're saying loss versus gain. I'm curious what that is, your experience of that.
So if you surrender your weapons and you surrender your mistaken notions and you surrender your false beliefs, you are empowered by something greater than you. It's not at all a position of weakness. It's a position of strength, but it's not your strength. It's what comes through that's available to you in that situation.
So do you see yourself as like a vessel or a vehicle?
Yeah, sure. A portal, an access point where things come to me. Therefore, my soul, when I try to make use of them for egotistic purposes, they go away. I start writing poetry and say, oh, I'm going to be a great poet. I'm going to send these out to these magazines and get these poetry published. Okay, that's it. Over. They were for me. They were teachings. So the more I latch on to something and want to use it for self-aggrandizement or worldly success, that's not. When I was doing those drawings, there were two sayings that came in. And so sayings, like a voice in your head, really like the voice of God, And one was not to be used for your own sweet will. And the other was, did you think this was going to be easy, this journey you're taking all by yourself? And so I still hear that all the time.
And all by yourself because you can't take it by yourself, or?
Because we can only all do the journey by ourselves. We may have friends and companions. We may get some hints from somebody else. We may get some helpful suggestions, but it's a lonely, painful, difficult, but ultimately very rewarding journey of the self. That's what all the hero journeys, that's what all the myths are about. It's always the individual.
As I say, sometimes no one's coming to save you.
That's hard.
Unfortunately.
Yeah. Fortunately.
Fortunately,
because
and
as long as you're
unfortunately.
relying on somebody else to save you, you're not going to learn.
Right.
Avoiding what you need to face and deal with.
So we have the blessing of a lot of young people around us, family members, friends. If you were to give guidance or advice to a 16-year-old or a 20-year-old based on your experiences, what would you say?
I wouldn't give advice unless I was asked.
Mm-hmm. Okay, let's assume they asked.
It depends on what they'd ask.
Okay.
Really, I mean, it's all context specific.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if they say, what do I do about my boyfriend left me? I'm sure he'd come up with something. The spiritual teachers who I know don't know anything. They don't have advice in the abstract. But if somebody comes to them with a question, they always have the right answer. They always have the compassionate, insightful, spiritually grounded response. And it's usually a matter of compassion. I mean, that's the basis. If somebody comes with a problem, you listen, you're compassionate, you feel their pain without taking it on. You don't usually have much practical advice for people. I tend to do that, but that's a habit with me.
Is there anything else you haven't said that you want to say?
Let me go back to that for just one other
Yeah.
sentence. There is a way of gently and lovingly suggesting to people whenever's going on for them that they consider what their part in it is.
Yeah.
And because people come with conflict and problems, everything is I want this or I don't want that, right? And everything, a lot of it has to do with other people. So Jung has this great thing. If you're in conflict with somebody or difficulty with somebody, and 99% of the problem is they're causing it, you still are better off working on the 1% that is yours. So it's that inward turning. IFS calls this the U-turn. Internal Family Systems Therapy calls this the U-turn. Gently turn it back. Oh, what's going on for you? Oh, what are you feeling? Oh, what's that? Finding those inner spaces that can open up, as John did for me many years ago, and allowing that natural, spontaneous, loving, compassionate, joyful self to find a way to come back and heal us. So you asked me if there's anything else.
Yeah.
I just want to express my love for you, and it's a great opportunity to talk about really deep and important matter.
Well, maybe there will be more. And I'm
Great.
grateful too.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All my life I was looking for a sign. Wasn't sure where to find a peace of mind. Sometimes you can see things when it ain't time. Well, for you I'll be putting it all aside.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Surrendering to the Signs. I hope you found it inspiring. Please like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss a single episode. Also, feel free to hop on over to surrenderingtothesigns.com, where you can download our free e-guide with examples and your own workbook to help you identify your signs. We look forward to seeing you in the next episode and wish you well.